Hi, I'm Ingo from Roast Rebels, and this video is a cut from a webinar from a talk that we did on the Kaffelogic machine with Wayne Burrows from the Kaffelogic team. Wayne is an incredibly experienced coffee professional, a roaster, a barista champion. He knows really a lot about coffee, about roasting, as you will learn in this session. The session is really made for people that are already working with the Kaffelogic, so we really go into details, we really dive deep. Nevertheless, there are also a lot of other informations that you will find in this webinar. You will see in the video there was one part that I had to cut out. In this part, Wayne was talking about innovations the project is working on. I can tell you these are really exciting innovations, and as always with the Kaffelogic team, these are the kind of innovations that you can always put on your machine nevertheless when you bought it. So doesn't matter if you bought your machine a year ago, if you're buying it now or in a couple of weeks, you will have the possibility to really easily adapt these upcoming innovations on your machines so that your machine is really an investment for the future and your machine will get even better over the years. So you can really look forward to that. I hope you understand that this kind of information isn't something that we can share publicly on YouTube. This is information that you get in a closed webinar session. So if you want to attend one of these sessions in the future, go on our website, roastrebels.com. In the webinar section, you'll find the next dates on sessions we have for different machines and also different other topics with great roasters. But now I would say, let's start and go into the webinar session. Have fun. Damir had a question and he asks how to decide when to mark the end of the first crack. So not the beginning, but the end of the first crack.
It's an interesting question, and it's a question that I not only I get a lot, but I think roasters who do courses with people roasting coffee gets a lot. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough to answer. There's a couple. I will answer it the best way that I can. Damir, I will answer it the best way that I can, but there are various things that can impact first crack. The first part that can impact first crack is the consistency of processing coffee, or the specialty or the commercial quality of coffee. And what I mean behind that is the more quality focused we get with our coffee, the more specialty we get with our coffee, the more micro lot we get with our coffee, the more to that top pinnacle we play with our coffee, what we'll find is our coffee will crack very uniformly. So it will almost all of it will crack at the same time, and all of it will end crack at the same time. Okay, so it's a lot easier when you're using very pinnacle light coffees, when using a more specialty grade coffee. Okay, that's the first thing. More commercial coffees will tend to have different cracks, and what that can do to the end of first crack is it'll allow you or prompt you to doubt yourself when it comes to end of first crack. Okay, so we've all had those roasts where we've gone, this is the end of first crack. It's, for example, a minute 30 after first crack started. That's the end of first crack. But then we have like one or two outlier cracks. And we think to ourselves, but is that really the end of first crack? So, and that's more a commercial coffee. Now that does two things for the profile. It messes around with profiles and it plays around with profiles. But anyway, we won't get into that. How do I determine, and how have I always determined end of first crack? It's the same as how I determine the start of first crack. It's when the actual bean mass, the mass of coffee, stops cracking. And you will hear it. So first crack is in theory brought along by, there's a pop, a pop, a pop, almost 4 or 5 seconds in between, sometimes 10 seconds in between when it first starts. And then you'll get a snap where it goes pop, 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 pop. And the cracks are almost a second between each other. At that start, that is first crack on, but the same thing happens when first crack ends. So crack, 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 pop, 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 and then suddenly it goes pop, pop, pop at that point, that is first crack end. You might have one or two outliers, and it's really up to you to determine where first crack ends. If you want first crack to end another 30 seconds when the last bean cracks, that's completely up to you. If you are going to choose that, choose it consistently. So my definition of it is I want to look at about a minute to a minute and a half of total first crack on profiles that I really enjoy. Sometimes I even drop profiles when I'm dropping coffee at about 10% development or 12-13% development. I'm actually even dropping them while coffee is cracking. I'm dropping them at 40 seconds, maybe 50 seconds during first crack. And there could even be coffee that's cracking during cool down, if that makes sense. So if you are going to look for that, my recommendation would be when that entire mass stops cracking, that's when I show end of first crack, and look for about a minute to about a minute and a half, depending on your profile, but about a minute on average would be a good time for first crack.
There is one question I have concerning the beginning of first crack and the roast levels. How important, or does it influence the roast if I'm marking first crack within the roast? So there is the possibility to mark first crack. Does it influence the roast because I'm setting the roast level, or is this more an information that I have for me than when I'm looking at the logs so that I can change the profile for the next roast?
It's more information. Logging first crack on the Kaffelogic won't change the level at all. So if your level is set on level 3, for example, and if you look in Kaffelogic Studio, level 3 has an end temperature of, I'm taking a random number, 215 degrees. That's what your level 3 has an end temperature of. If I log first crack and my coffee cracks at 207 degrees, my roasting is still going to end at 215 degrees. It's not going to change that because I've logged first crack. All that I've done is I've just given the roaster more information to give me back information. So I'm just communicating to the roaster, and the roaster's communicating back to me, basically. It won't affect your level at all. What it can be used, and we recommend how it's used, is we recommend it's used to put a peg in the sand to say, how far, that's my peg, how far can I go? So is that level 3 really the level that I'm looking for? Level 3 could be level 2.3 for argument's sake, because when I log my first crack, I then have a development percentage, or I have a time after first crack, or I have a temperature after first crack. And if I'm going to a specific recipe, using that as a reference, well, then that's my way of knowing how close I am to that. Okay, if that makes sense. So again, with roasting, the more information you can give back to the system, the more the system can be accurate for you.
That's because the roast level goes to the temperature and not on the development time percentage.
Yeah, roast level or bracketing is calibrated to end temperature of roast. So when you go between level 2, level 3, level 4, those are all end roast temperatures that you've calibrated that profile to.
I've had another question from Andreas that he asked me before the session because he cannot tune in. And his question was, when it comes to the booster kit, his question was, how does the booster kit, or then the amount of beans in the roaster, changes the roasting profiles? And you can probably talk about, first of all, the standard profiles that come with the machines, but he also in particularly asked about self-developed profiles.
Yes. Okay. The booster kit, and here's the booster kit right here. You can see the boost ring. My boost rings, it's very different to how your boost ring will look. Your boost ring will be anodized. It will look slightly different. These springs the springs on the bottom of the boost ring. Yours will be a little bit easier to squeeze. Mine is quite hard to squeeze. That's why it pulls out of my roaster a little bit more difficult. But that's effectively the boost ring that you will get. That's not really where the magic is. The magic's what happens in the roaster itself and in the firmware. The one thing that we have in the roaster, and this might be difficult to see, Ingo, just from trying to get the picture.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, just from a picture perspective, I can't show you there, but and this is why we don't have any videos up on the boost ring yet, because how we gauge our boost. So to answer the question, how we gauge our boost and how we translate or manipulate our profile is done at the moment is done in a two-step process. Okay, so we put beans into the roaster. We then go to what we call a fan speed multiplier. And that's going to be the one question. How does Kaffelogic on profile, on any profile, how does Kaffelogic adapt its profile and what profile to your amount of coffee? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to tell the Kaffelogic how much coffee we're putting in. Because if we tell it how much coffee we're putting in, it will apply a fan manipulator or a fan multiplier to first and foremost your fan profile. That's what it will do. If we can multiply the fan profile, well, that means that when I put 100 grams in and I have a specific fan, I then put 200 grams in or 180 grams in, and my fan has to multiply to X in order to move that coffee efficiently. And the goal is that it moves the coffee exactly the same way as your 100 grams moves, because that's the first step. We have to get coffee tumbling in the same rate. We have to get the same efficiencies. The second thing is what do we do with profiles? So do we extend the profile? Do we go more time in the profile? And what is that time? That's also a multiplier. What I mean behind that is when you're roasting 100 grams and now you're roasting 200 grams, it doesn't mean that your time doubles. Your time increases exponentially according to your profile. Now, what that is, your time could increase by a minute. Your time could increase by 2 minutes. If you don't have a fan multiplier, your time actually comes down. So 200 grams can take you 30 to 40 seconds less to roast than 100 grams. Okay. So we look at multipliers on two fronts: profile multiplier, fan multiplier. Okay. And that's a systems thing. That's by you putting in, I want to roast 160 grams, and it will add those multipliers to whatever profile you put in. Now, you can change the multipliers yourself. Like anything on Kaffelogic, you can manipulate, you can change those multipliers. But those multipliers will always have a default set of multipliers that you can revert back to, if that makes sense. Okay, so it's completely customizable. The system's completely customizable. Why is it customizable? It's customizable because we don't know as Kaffelogic, and the Kaffelogic doesn't know, if your coffee, 200 grams, how specific you want that coffee to be from a roasting perspective. I'll give you an example. It's 200 grams, but is it 200 grams of an experimental processed coffee, which works completely different to 200 grams of a washed or 200 grams of a natural? Okay, so you can choose to override the system and work it manually. What that means is that you can actually choose how you want your coffee to move in chamber before it roasts. Okay, this is almost like you going into your manual mode on the Kaffelogic, turning the fan up, and that fan, that 130 that your coffee is tumbling perfect on that fan, well, that's that's 13,500 RPM. So if I go to my fan profile and I start my fan profile at 13,000 or 15,500 RPM, that's the perfect optimal fan to start my profile at. Okay. So you will do that manually if you want to, but the multiplier should take care of that. Okay, now profile-wise, the profile shouldn't need to change unless you physically want it to change. Why shouldn't the profile need to change? Because the system is designed to keep coffee on the profile. So regardless of you roasting 100 grams, 150 grams, 180 grams, 200 grams, the profile shouldn't need to change. What needs to change on the profile is time. That's what needs to change. But the physical profile itself doesn't need to change unless we want it to change. Now that there is just a pure 110% trial and error. That's like you putting 100 grams in your roaster now and then putting 120 grams in your roaster now, tasting both batches, but you haven't made any adaptation to anything. You haven't made any fan adaptation. You haven't made any adaptation to your profile. And now you're comparing the two. Well, you have to compare the two apples to apples. You can't compare the two apples to pears. And when you compare apples to apples, you can then make changes to the profile, or we can assist you to make changes to the profile. But the profile should work without any adaptation with you moving. And that comes from our testing. That's the testing that we've done. That's the testing that we've done on Kaffelogic. We've taken 100 grams, calibrated the unit to 100 grams, then put 200 grams in, put the same profile in, but made no adaptations to the fan profile. So made no adaptations to more beans tumbling, more mass tumbling. Okay. The only thing that we've done is we've just obviously changed our calibration of fan so that our coffee tumbles in the chamber. Otherwise we'll have a fire, we'll have a roast fire, you know? So we've told the unit that it has 200 grams in it. That's what we've told the unit. But the profile hasn't changed, and the profile is just moving absolutely beautifully it's being recorded absolutely beautifully, you know? But funnily enough, 200 grams actually takes, 35 seconds to 40 seconds less time to roast. And that's because we haven't changed the fan profile. We haven't told it to be more efficient. So it's actually got a lot more exothermic energy. And that exothermic energy roasts it quicker. So 200 grams is now actually taking us less time to roast than 100 grams. But from a taste perspective, there definitely is a difference. It's not huge, but there is a difference in taste. We can pick up a little bit more roastiness. We can pick up a little bit more espresso focused roast. But the minute we then adjust our fan profile, so the minute we add a multiplier to our fan profile, we take our entire profile and we just shift it up. Okay, by a multiplication, well, now we get like for like. Now a 100 gram coffee tastes just the same as a 200 gram coffee. And they're indistinguishable on blind tastings.
Right. That's great. And this is done by the machine itself, this multiplier.
Well, the key is, Ingo, is we want the machine to be doing most of the work, because that's what it should be. It should be a simple solution. We can make it super complicated, but we can also try and simplify it as much as possible. So it's like any profile building on Kaffelogic. You try it, that's your base, and then you either adapt it. Every single profile on Kaffelogic, every single profile that's been developed by any person working on Kaffelogic, okay, has been developed from the Kaffelogic Classic profile. Because that's the Kaffelogic Classic profile is the profile that loads up. Every profile has been made from Kaffelogic Classic. So our goal is that you take Boost, you put what you want in, the multiplication is added to that. You then roast. What are you comparing that against? You're comparing that against your previous roast, your previous batch. If you can compare it against your previous batch, and if it's slightly different, or if you want to experiment more with it, well, then that's your opportunity to experiment. That becomes your new norm. But if it's fine, well, then drink it, then enjoy it. It's like anything with roasting. If it's fine, drink it, enjoy it, But we want to try and make it as simple as possible for many different types of users to use. So we want the roaster to be doing 95% of the work.
Great. Awesome. Michael had a question concerning the boost kit as well. And the question is, what is the recommended filling quantity, or is there a range of the recommended quantity?
So this is where the boost gets a bit tricky, because the boost gets a bit tricky because and I don't know how many of the users know this, but Kaffelogic has a certain amount of power. A certain amount of maximum power it has available to roast coffee. Okay. Now when we talk about profiles, and when we do work with roasters, we talk about pitching profiles. So we talk about intense profiles. We talk about softer core profiles. We talk about more espresso-based profiles or intense filter-based profiles. Now, any profile that's pitched, any profile that's running at over or very, very, very close to 1400 watts of power, okay, that will essentially starve or restrict your roaster from running anything over that. Okay, now I'll give you an example. If you've created a profile that is exceptionally intense and steep in the beginning, very pitched in the beginning, and your profile is running close to, just your preheat power alone is running close to 1200. But your profile in total is running at 1420. So much so that you've even taken the 120 recommended batch and you've dropped it down to 80 grams, for example, just to get more out of it. Well, you're riding on that threshold of production. You're riding on that threshold of boost. You're already pushing the roaster to close to its limits. How do you expect to now get double the amount of coffee? It's not possible. But that's a decision that you've taken. That's a decision that you've made to make that profile that intense. Okay, now what we're saying is that the general profiles that we run and the general profiles, the intense profiles we run, are only running somewhere around about the 1,300, 1,200, 1,300. So we actually have quite a bit of room to play with profiles. We have quite a bit of room to play with boost. What I'm saying to the users is I'm saying that 200 grams might not be possible for some users with some profiles. That total amount, that high amount, might be 180, 190 grams, but it might not be 200 grams. But for some profiles, that amount would be 130 grams, but you're starting with 80 grams, you know, so you're almost doubling it, if that makes sense. Okay, it all depends on the profile you're running and how much you're pushing that roaster within that profile.
So what is
now there are other factors. Yeah, sorry, Ingo.
Sorry, but if I understood you correctly, you say if we go with the standard profiles or with the deliver profiles, you can push it up to 200 grams. Just if somebody is now using a profile where he's working with full power in the beginning of the roast, then having twice the amount of beans, it could be a bit limited. So if they have self-developed profiles that are really, really pushing the roaster to the extreme at the moment, then it will be, of course, a bit slower just having the larger amount of beans.
Yes, just to put it into perspective and just to put it out there, the coffee will still roast. It will still roast. It just won't roast optimally, if that makes sense. So you will notice a flat line on your curve. And you will go, why is my curve flatlining? Why is my mean temperature flatlining? Maybe I've got something wrong with my roaster. Well, no, there's nothing wrong with your roaster. You've just pushed your roaster to the maximum that it can possibly take. All right, so the recommendation there would be to look at what you're getting, to look at the profile, and to possibly bring that profile down slightly. So taper that profile off slightly to give you a little bit more. The coffee will roast. If you put 200 grams inside a Kaffelogic, it will roast 200 grams. I can guarantee you that. Not right now, because there's no manipulation. So there's no multiplier. If you put 200 grams of coffee in your Kaffelogic right now, the likelihood of you setting fire to it is probably very high because 200 grams just won't move. It doesn't have a fan speed multiplier on it. It needs a fan speed multiplier because you put so much more coffee in. Okay, now Ingo, it will still roast. You will get roasted coffee, but it might not be the optimal that you're looking for. And that's because of that intensity of profile. We're talking about extreme cases here. We're talking about users that have really played and really manipulated their profiles. Okay, but if you're roasting 80 grams of coffee, there's a reason why you're roasting 80 grams of coffee. If your profile is very intense, there's a reason why your profile is very intense. It's probably not the profile that you're going to want to roast double the amount of coffee for, if that makes sense. You're doing it for a specific reason. All that I'm saying is again, try the profile. You will know already when you create that profile if you're right on the borderline of energy requirement for your coffee. But again, you're doing it for something specific. Okay, the profiles we're using at the moment, and the profiles we're using for filter, the profiles we're using for cupping, a lot of the profiles we're using for competitions, those profiles have quite a bit of leeway that you're still able to go as far as adaptation is concerned. The more leeway we have, the more we can get to those higher numbers, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Maybe Michael, correct me if just to make sure I understood his question correctly. I assume his question is, could I go, for example, to 140, 160, 200? So are there several multipliers, or is there just one to make it double and then one to make it half?
No, Ingo, you know, we thought about it in the beginning. We thought we would do like 3 multipliers or 4 multipliers, like go 120, obviously, which we all know the roaster can do, then go 150, then go 180, and then go 200. And then we actually went, no, we have to do this in tens. We have to do this in multiplications of 10. So you'll be able to go 130, 140, 150, 160. You'll be able to go in multiplications of 10. Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, you'll tell the roaster what you want, and it will apply that multiplier according to that. Yeah. That'll give the user a lot more room to play and explore profiles with. One profile, you might only be able to, one profile, you might do 200 grams absolutely perfectly, with an even further adapted fan profile. Absolutely perfect. Because remember, the multiplier adds itself onto your adapted fan profile. That's what it does. Okay. So you might do 200 grams of one coffee on one profile perfectly, but then your next profile, you may only be able to do 170 grams because it's so much more intense. Well, we're giving you the option to find that. It might take you 1 or 2 roasts, but we're giving you the option to find that level. So just to show you, because we've obviously been asked the questions about the videos, do we have any videos on how it's working? The video that I want to show you is I want to put coffee into the roaster. I want to choose how much, and then the roaster manipulates my profile, and then I want to roast it. I can't show you that today, but I can show you quickly the steps that it takes to get to that process. So the steps it would take to get to that process is boostering on, obviously. If you don't have the boostering on your roaster, you lift your chaff collector up after roast and coffee will just fall out. Okay. We've been doing this for 2 years already. Boostering on, you would have put in a code that comes with your boostering. Now, what that does for you is it opens up the ability to do your fan manipulation. That's what it opens up the ability to do. Okay, because if you have the boostering, it means that we at least go, okay, you're right to do this now. Okay, the code now allows you the option to do that update. Now, what we would do in that case is we would go, and this is, you could do this on your roaster right now. You go into manual mode, and then you go your fan. Now I've got 100 or 150 or 170 grams of coffee in here. Okay. This is effectively how the multiplication will work. Visually now, I go up to where that coffee is tumbling efficiently, like it should tumble. That's my multiplication. Okay. Right. I save that multiplication. All right. Now, what I mean by saving it is, okay, I go, 135. 13,500 or 165, 16,000 RPM, whatever it is. Okay. I then go out of that. I then go into Kaffelogic Studio, and I then add that on to my fan profile. That makes sense. Okay. So if my fan profile is on 14,000, I bring it up to 16,000 for argument's sake. Okay, I then save that on my profile. I then push that to my roaster. Okay, USB, in my case, cable, connect system into my roaster. Okay, I've got my 150 gram coffee in here, and then I run my roast. That's a system that I will do right now to do it. Okay, and I will have to do that with every single coffee. Okay, now your system should be as simple as putting your coffee in. On Kaffelogic Studio, it should ask you how much coffee are you going to run, for example. It should apply that to the profile. You put the profile in here, okay? You roast. The alternative is on here, on Kaffelogic here, to ask you what are you roasting. And that manipulator, I go up with the plus and the minus key to where I need it to be, okay? And it will do that manipulation on the profile that you've loaded in, if that makes sense. Okay, so it'll be a 2-step process for the user. For me, it's a 5-step process. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's one question from Michael I will ask later. Now I will go into the one that Stefan asked yesterday, and this is about how to translate profiles from the Kaffelogic, for example, to a larger roaster. So if you use it as a profile roaster, because you're roasting with, you're working with roasters that use it on the production roaster. He particularly asked about the Ilio Bullet, which is about a 1 kilo roaster. So can you talk a bit about that? What information we get out of the Kaffelogic to use as a profile roaster?
Yeah, I can answer that question. I can help you with that. Could you give me access to share my screen if you don't mind?
Oh, sure.
No worries. I just want to share Kaffelogic. It's a lot quicker and easier for me to describe it in Kaffelogic for you. There we go. Okay, so we're all looking at a log in Kaffelogic right now. We should all be able to see this now. Okay. Actually, let me do that as well, because you don't need to see my ugly face. Okay, so within Kaffelogic, so the question is, how do we work with importing and exporting files? Now, Kaffelogic, you should always see Kaffelogic, and speaking to Stefan directly, but speaking to everyone, basically, we've designed Kaffelogic as a medium. We've designed Kaffelogic as a lock and a key to different roast profile software, Cropster and Artisan being the 2 biggest ones. When we look at Alio, when we look at the Bullet, when we look at Ikawa, when we look at Roost, these are systems that have been designed in-house. Okay, now Kaffelogic can work with these systems, but we need essential software. So we need a log, or we need a profile from these systems to be able to integrate that into Kaffelogic. Okay, now what do I mean by that? Ingo, could you just tell me, do you see that drop-down menu? Yes. Do you see a drop-down menu?
Yes.
Okay, so you see the import, and you see Artisan, Cropster, Ikawa, and Sonafresco?
Yes.
Okay, and then you see the export, and you only see Artisan, Sonafresco, and then PDF. Okay, now this is how it works effectively. I want to import a artisan file, for example, and you saw I clicked artisan. And what that will do is it will open up, you might not be seeing this, but it's a file on my computer. And I'm going to open up an artisan profile for you right now. And I think it's Alpha Ethiopian. Okay, now a window pops up. You should be seeing this. It should say import from CSV or JSON, import as a Kaffelogic profile, or import as a Kaffelogic log. Okay, right. Now this is where Kaffelogic can be used to import, but also to export. Now I'll explain the two to you. Okay, when you roast on Alio, for example, you roast on Alio, as you know, Ingo, because you've roasted many times on Alio, You roast on alio, you go through your profile, and first crack takes place at 194 degrees, 194 degrees. Okay. And we finish the roast at 205 degrees, 206 degrees, whatever that may be. Okay. We all know through using Kaffelogic starts to crack around about 205, 206. Here in New Zealand, 212, 213 degrees. Okay, right. So it cracks very different to alio, cracks very different to a probat, cracks very different to a Gießen. Okay, and we end our roasts at 215, 220, 225, whatever it may be. Okay, we have to, first of all, understand what we're roasting on, and then we also have to understand how that relates Kaffelogic to then the file. So what you're seeing here is you see a temperature conversion envelope. Temperature conversion envelope is very simple. We've got Kaffelogic information and we've got alio bullet information. And what I mean behind that is points on a graph on where our coffees simulate to each other. So turnaround point, first crack, browning phase, color change. These are all points in phases that we can use. And we populate this table. On the left-hand side will be Kaffelogic. The 212 will be my first crack. The 194 will be the first crack on the alio. The 218 will be my endpoint on Kaffelogic. 214 will be my endpoint on alio. I can put as many points as I want in. And we go to OK, which then converts, actually, I'm not going to convert them, which then converts those temperatures into Kaffelogic. Now, when I go import, what you're seeing on your screen now in Kaffelogic is you're seeing a Cropster or an art. Why do I say Cropster and artisan? Because both formats work the same file, basically. So it's a JSON file. Now, if I look at this, I've got a BT. There's my BT temperature. There's my first crack, which is at 193 degrees. So this is not a Kaffelogic profile. This is an alio log, sorry, not an alio log. This is a probat log. Okay, right. And there's my probat log. I've just literally brought a Cropster log into my Kaffelogic. You can see my charge temperature, and you can see my turnaround temperature, which is actually quite high. I would expect it to be a bit lower than that, but anyway, it's a small batch. Okay, my information all on the right-hand side, and I can add in things. I can put in gas. This is all information that it draws from the log. Okay, that's great. That's good. Now, how do I take that and how do I make that into Kaffelogic? Okay, well, I go File and I go Extract Profile from Log. Okay. Now, what I can do here is I can just use that same conversion information and add that same conversion information into this. Okay. So I can say, well, my first crack is actually 213. My level, I'm not really going to worry about my level. Don't really want to worry about it. Or I want to make my level, I don't know, level 2.1. Okay. And that will extract information for me. Okay. And I'll show you what I mean now. I'm going to do it practically for you. And there will be the profile that I've just put on, okay, that I've just created from Kaffelogic. So what I've done is I've taken my Cropster log and I've just pulled a profile from that. Okay, there's another way of doing it. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go artisan. I'm going to go Ethiopia. I'm going to go add conversion temperature. That's a table we worked at. And I'm going to go import. And what that's going to do again is it's going to bring the profile. Okay, this is just a simpler way of doing it. It's just doing what I wanted to do. This is going to pull a profile from the log. Okay, if that makes sense. Okay. There's my log. as you can see before, okay, with information. And this is my mean profile. Now, obviously, I'm in a log state. I can't move it. I'm going to have to go File, Extract Profile from Log. Let's move that through. That is my profile. What I do now is I now roast 100 grams on that profile, or 120 grams on that profile, or whatever it is. You'll notice that this is now in Kaffelogic speak. So it is now in Kaffelogic temperature, because I've converted with that conversion envelope. And then I go, once I've now roasted, and I go, right, I'm now going to export that, and I'm going to export that out as a Kaffelogic profile. I'm going to export that as a JSON profile, as a file format. And I use the same conversion temperature envelope because I want it to now be in Alio bullet speak, in Alio bullet temperatures. Okay. And I can export that, and that'll export as a JSON file, which I will then save onto my desktop, and I will then bring that into Alio, or I'll bring that into Cropster, and then I will roast a batch of that, if that makes sense. Okay.
I think that way will probably in the praxis be the way it's usually done, like working on profiles on the small machine and then export it to artisan for the larger roaster. So this is actually how you would do it. So what you explained now would be the second half of the step, that you have a profile that you've developed on the Kaffelogic, and then you would export it as a JSON file using the same envelope, just in the other direction, so that you have then a curve that you can import into Artisan. Did I understand you right?
That's correct. That's correct. So I could do the same here if I went, for example, there's my profile. Sorry, let me just take these conversions, these comparisons off. There's my profile. I don't know how this is going to roast, but I could take that, for example, and I could go export, and I could export it into Artisan as a JSON file, and I could go edit temperature conversion, and I can put in the features, put in the numbers that I want. They're reference numbers, they're expected numbers. Okay. And I can go okay, and I can then save that as a file that I can bring into Cropster, or I can bring into Alio. Why do I say they're expected numbers? Because maybe there's a coffee that you've never roasted, but you know, because you've roasted on your Alio bullet, and you know that your first crack on coffees that you're roasting generally all sit around about that 194, 195 degrees. So why would this coffee act any different? Surely this coffee should be cracking around that point. So again, it's an expected. It's like anything we do in roasting, we have to do a trial first. We have to say, where are we? What's our benchmark first? And then we move according to that benchmark. Now, you're roasting 100 grams, like you taking it to your Alio bullet. My suggestion is don't roast 1 kilogram on it. Maybe roast the minimum. What is the minimum on Alio? I think it's 400, 300, 400 grams.
No, officially it's 150 grams. So
okay,
you can, I would recommend about 300 grams, but you can go lower.
Yeah, 300, I would recommend 300 grams as well. So roast your 300 grams, taste it, and then go, what changes do we need to make? Bring that back into Kaffelogic, pull the profile again, make those changes, push it out again. Okay, that would be the workflow. Now, you might get it first time, but you might get it second time. You might get it even better as the second time option. This is what we do with roasters. This is what I do with, there's a roastery in New Zealand called Kakako. I do a lot of this work with Kakako in New Zealand. Kakako's, they've got a 35 kilogram Probat roaster that runs full Cropster system on it. And this is the work that I do with them. They launch all their coffees off the Kaffelogic. So they'll come in development phase. We'll do one or two profiles on Kaffelogic. So we'll find the best profile for them. I don't mean a cupping profile. I mean espresso profile, fit for purpose espresso profile. Then we'll take that and we'll push that out to Cropster. Okay. And we'll use the same temperature conversions. We'll do exactly the same thing with that. They'll load it into Cropster, and then they will run a test batch. They'll run 2 test batches on that, and we'll taste. In the beginning, we found ourselves running maybe 3 test batches to get our eyes set in. But now at the moment, they're running batch on batch on batch because they know the tweaks they have to make. They know the development, they know the changes they have to make. And they're now launching coffees off the back of Kaffelogic. So in that way, it sped up their process. What you also do is they now are starting to take all their Cropster profiles, all of their roasting profiles, and they're now starting to put them into Kaffelogic because they can roast 100 grams on them. And they're going, well, if we can roast 100 grams, and we can start to make these subtle changes on 100 grams, it's going to save us a lot more money and a lot more time in the long run. So their efficiencies around roasting are increasing because they're making micro adjustments on these profiles and then feeding that profile back into the Cropster system.
Great.
Yeah. Another company we do here in New Zealand as well is ACR Roasters, coffee roaster, which is Coca-Cola's coffee roaster. And they've got a 35 kg Loring that we run. We run the same system on with them.
So you need a bit some work in the beginning to align the 2 systems. But then once you have found the tweaks, you can then use it, and you're going to be very efficient using it as a profile roaster.
Yeah, Ingo, what it takes is it takes you actually roasting on your roaster. So it takes you roasting on the Alio bullet. That's what it does, so that you find those spaces, you find those reference points. And then it takes you working with Kaffelogic Studio. It takes you working on the profile software, because you need to know where to adapt. You need to know where to play. You need to know what you want to change in order to get that through, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I had some questions which are quite in another way, and it's about the protection or the cleaning of the roaster. So one question was, did you ever thought about putting a second sieve, something like that, into the drum so that it doesn't get any tars, so that the chamber stays clean? And then also a corresponding question on how you would recommend to clean the inside of the roaster, the roast chamber.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I just want to say one thing, just to finish off with Stefan, if you don't mind. Sure. This is what we as a team do a lot of training, and we do a lot of work with. So if Stefan needs, or anyone needs help with this type of manipulation of profiles, he can try it by himself. But we have quite a bit of knowledge on it, and we can assist him if he needs assistance. On the cleaning, it's a bit of a tricky one, because how much is residue, what is causing the residue, and how do you clean it? I would recommend that you never put anything wet in the Kaffelogic chamber. And I recommend that you don't use any form of detergent in the Kaffelogic chamber. Now, that is a little bit contrary to the manual, a little bit contrary to what Kaffelogic has told you before. Kaffelogic telling you before has said use a little bit of detergent. I'm talking about users that have the old manual, that have older Kaffelogic units. If you look through your manual, it might say use a bit of espresso cleaning detergent. And actually brush. So what they mean by brush in there is, when you use espresso cleaning detergent, it causes like a bit of a paste, like a sandpaper type of paste. And if you use that on the inside, you can take most of that residue off. Okay. The problem with that, Ingo, is now you have that paste on the inside that you have to clean away. Okay, so my recommendation, you'll see with the new manuals, you'll see that we've just removed that completely. My recommendation would be take a brush, like a hard bristle brush. I wouldn't use a steel bristle brush. I would use like a very hard nylon plastic bristle brush, and actually brush where you have that residue to try and get as much of that off as possible. Okay. If it is a problem to you, okay, why I say if it is a problem to you, that residue is a normal residue buildup in coffee. You get that in 99% of your drum roasters, you get that. There's not one drum roaster that doesn't. And I'm yet to see roasters take out their drums and clean them as thorough as they should clean them. Okay. So my caveat to that is if it starts to really affect your roast, what I mean by that is, you know that you've got a cupping roast profile, you know that you've got a real good filter-based profile that you're roasting, and all your coffee is coming out with that real dirty, roasty flavor at the back of your throat, that bitterness at the back of your throat. Okay. And your chamber almost looks like the residue you can scrape off with your finger type of thing. Okay. Then I would say clean it. Besides that, I wouldn't actually worry about cleaning. I really wouldn't. I think a certain amount of residue is just a byproduct of roasting. Yeah. Now, that doesn't answer the question. I think answering the question is, if you are going to clean it, use a nylon brush and try and brush as much of it out as possible. Okay. All right. That would be my recommendation. Yeah. If you're going to put a cloth inside to kind of mop up what you've brushed off, use a dry cloth, maybe something like a microfiber cloth like that can pick stuff up a little bit more. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
I don't know, Damir, if this is also answering your question. You were also asking about putting a sieve or something inside, but then it would really influence the airflow of the roaster. So that would be a bit a tricky one. And as I understand Wayne now, it's not that bad if there are some residues. Just if there are too much, you take it out. But if there are just a little bit of discolor or a little bit of residues, then it doesn't influence the roast.
It really shouldn't influence the roast. I mean, I've got a roaster here that's it's downstairs. I think that was one of my original demo versions. So none of you should have the chamber. You should have a brand new chamber in yours. It's the old version of Kaffelogic, and that chamber is pretty well worn. It's got quite a bit of residue on it, and I still roast. I really enjoy the coffee. I really enjoy the coffee I get off it. It doesn't have that roasty taste. I get what I want out of the coffees when I roast it. And I've never cleaned the chamber. I've never cleaned the chamber. So I believe that residue is just something you're going to get with roasting. If you are wanting to clean it, just clean it with that bristle brush. Clean it with that nylon brush. Yeah, that will be my recommendation.
And then there was another question about would you offer, or what do you think about reading profile graphs, detecting mistakes and how to correct them? So the question is, do you offer any courses, even paid courses or sessions on how to read profile graphs, find mistakes and correct them?
Yeah, we do, Ingo. As you know, I mean, we offer training services, consulting services and training services to Kaffelogic customers. We do quite a bit of it free of charge because we really believe that Kaffelogic users need to get the benefit out of Kaffelogic. So what I'm saying to you is I'm able to help any one of your customers out there with profiles. I'm able to help them with diagnosing profiles. I'm able to help them with picking up mistakes, but to reason. Okay, what I mean by that is 15 logs coming through every single day going diagnose. Obviously it's a lot of work. So it's within reason. Okay, we don't put a number to it, but we say there comes a point where if we have to create profiles for you, or if we have to really redo these profiles for you, that there will be a cost to it. There should be a cost to it. There will be a cost to it, but that cost is minimal. It is really minimal. So yes, we do offer paid sessions, but in saying that, I don't want to put anyone off. If anyone needs help with profiles and needs help diagnosing these issues, feel free to send me through profiles, and I will do my best to diagnose them and to get back to you in the best and the quickest time. Okay. One thing that I must say, and I said it yesterday as well, I need you to have the coffee and I need you to be tasting the coffee. Okay. So there's no use you send me a log and you say, it looks like there's a problem. And I go, well, how did the coffee taste? Anyone who's ever engaged with me will go, the first thing I say is, that's very nice. It looks like the roaster's done what it's supposed to do. Have you tasted it? Now, I have users that I've asked that to, and they've said to me, no, I threw the coffee away because the log looked funny. And I go, well, what happens if it's the best coffee you've ever tasted in your life? You know, it's information on a screen, you know, so I need you to taste the coffee. Then I need you then we need to work back and analyze that. Okay. So if you are going to send me profiles, or if you are going to send me logs, I don't have the coffee, so I can't taste it. I need you to have the coffee. I need us to diagnose it a little bit better and a little bit correctly on that point. Yeah. That also leads me to maybe adding in a little bit about information of logs, information of things like ROR lines and information. Just remember with any roasting, and specifically the Kaffelogic, because of this probe, because of this naked probe, you're going to get a lot of information. And that information isn't always going to look as beautiful as you want it to look. Just remember, there's a lot of information. Remember that we know what happens in here. We know about 0.0002% of what happens in here. And we know about 0.00002% of what actually happens in the coffee. That's given. It changes, it fluctuates. So we have to look at the information. We have to take the information as relative information, but we have to rely on taste to be our guide through that. Okay. I've roasted some terrible profiles where I look at the logs and I go, what the heck are you doing? But the coffee really tastes good. And I go, but how is it tasting good? Well, it does. It just does. The information is relevant and I can make changes based on the information, but I mustn't discount the fact that it's only information and it will change. Okay. So if you're looking for those profile lines to run super beautiful, the temperature to run super beautiful on the profile, and 1 out of every 4 profiles, it maybe dips under or dips up, there's maybe not a problem with it. It's just how your coffee is responding to the profile. Okay. Just please bear that in mind. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, you go now.
I think that's a super important information, because this is also what I often see in boards or groups, that people are starting to ask about the ROR, the flicks and crashes and everything. And at the end, about 85% of the taste in the coffee is choosing the right bean, choosing the right roasting color. And everything else is just really like, there was a session where we had a group of people in Germany roasting the same coffee to about the same level in all their home roasters. So one was using a bread machine, and we had about 12 different coffees. One was using the roast. So we had the whole range. And to be honest, the coffees, they gave it to me for a blind tasting. They were pretty similar. All of them were in really good quality because it was just a good bean. They choose a right roast level. So I think before reaching out with too much, with being too much concerned about ROR curves and everything, the most important is finding the right bean, finding the right roast color, probably play a bit around with the profiles. And then if you're still not happy with it, then probably go to Wayne or somebody else to ask about details.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You know, we think that there's a magic profile out there that we can, you know, we think that coffee just magically responds to profiles, and it doesn't. It's a recipe, you know. We've all extracted coffee, we've all brewed coffee before, and you can't say because I brew a specific coffee this way, because I use a ratio, or I extract my coffee this way. You can't tell me that because your espresso comes out tasting very bitter because it's under extracted and it runs out way too fast. You can't blame, you have to blame something, but what you can't blame is you can't blame your equipment. You have to look at the coffee first. You know, you can't tell me that because I'm not extracting correctly on my brand new item, my brand new La Marzocco espresso machine, okay, with my brand new EK grinder, okay, you can't tell me that my equipment's rubbish. My equipment's not rubbish. It's me. It's my input. It's how I'm taking that coffee and how I'm fitting that coffee to the equipment. Well, exactly the same with roasting. You can't take a coffee and put a profile into it and go, okay, magically, this must be the best coffee I've ever tasted in my life. You know, that may happen, but that's going to happen 1 out of 10 times, or maybe 2 out of 10 times, maybe 3 out of 10 times if you're really lucky. Okay, but you will get it. You will have a stage where you put a profile in that you go, this works. You put a profile in and you roast your coffee. And you know what? It just doesn't taste good, or it tastes okay. Doesn't taste like what the bag says, you know? Now, at what point do you go, am I just using the wrong profile? You know, am I just using the wrong profile for the wrong coffee? So this log that we're looking at right now, this is a representation of the right profile for the right coffee. That's what this log represents. Okay. But this log, this profile was worked over 4 months. This is not a profile that I just went, or we just went and sucked it out of our thumb. This profile is development. This profile is work. This profile is tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak to get it to this point on a random coffee, if that makes sense. Okay, so it is about planning. It is about working. It is about matching a coffee to a profile. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. Let me try experiment with another profile, or let me just try and play with the profile. Okay. That might frustrate certain users, but that's the beauty of roasting. It's not as simple as pressing a button. Unfortunately, there is work that needs to be done with it to get the optimal, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to choosing the right profile, now when we talk about profiles, you delivered some great profiles with the machine. My impression is that, and you always have kind of a roast level that you recommend for the profiles. And for example, here in Switzerland or a bit in Southern Europe, we tend to roast much darker. In Northern Europe, people tend to roast much lighter. So my question is about, with the standard profiles that you are delivering, can I use it for the whole range of roast levels, roast degrees? Or is there a level where you would recommend then at a certain roast level to go into the super dark profile, or at a certain roast level to more go into the cupping profile or a lighter profile?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually a very, very, very good question. It's also a hard question to answer, because we work with different variations of coffee professionals or enthusiasts with different levels of expertise. Okay, so I think the big question is where to start, and are these profiles good enough to start with? I firmly believe that regardless, you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start at a point. Okay, so for me, it's a case, Ingo, of what point do I start at? And then do I go left or do I go right of that point? Okay, now for me, the core profiles are exactly that. The core profiles are starting points. That's all that they are. The core profiles is saying, I don't know what coffee I actually have. I've just got a bag of coffee that someone gave me or I bought, but I need to roast it. Okay, so I need only 2 types of information. I need to know what origin it is. Okay, that's the minimum. And I need to know one piece of information. With the core profiles, I need to know an altitude, some form of altitude, how high it's been grown. Okay, that's the 2 minimum amounts of information that we require from roasting generally, okay, to push us into that space. The third is process, but we can get away with roasting just on those 2 things. Okay. Then you find a profile and you roast on that profile. Now, when you default load those profiles, generally they will be set for espresso type, medium roast espresso styles. That's what they're set for. That's what they default for. Now, if you go to the ones into that range of the brackets or the levels down to 1, okay, even up into the early parts of the 2s, you can get some real beautiful filter-based or pour-over-based coffees out of that. But if you go into the 4s and into the 5s, you're now getting into your deeper, richer, intense, roasty side of those profiles. Okay. And at that point there, you now to yourself, you now say, am I getting the flavor profile that I want out of this coffee? Okay. So I've got a Brazil that I'm roasting, and I've now roasted on a 1,500 to 2,000 altitude rest profile, for argument's sake. Okay. Because that's what I roasted my last, Costa Rican on, and that's what I want to try and roast this Brazil on. Okay. And I roast it, but I push that level up to 4.5. I will get roasty taste in that coffee. I will get roast flavor in that coffee. But that's what I'm expecting. That's how I like to drink my coffee. That's how I like to drink my cappuccinos. That's how I like to drink my flat whites. So if that's my expectation, then my measure on that expectation is, am I getting it, yes or no? And then through my extraction, through what I do in cup, I can then start to manipulate that to a point. If I want to go higher than that, definitely on that same profile, if you like that 4.5, but you find that you want a little bit more roastiness, you want a little bit more intensity, push it up to 5, push it up to 5.5. That's the, 5.9 is the maximum the profiles will go. Now, at that point, if you're going, I just want more. I want more charriness. I want more smokiness. At that point there, I would move to the super dark. Okay, so what I would do, my range of movement, if I'm looking to go that dark, is I would go middle ground profiles, so 1,500 to 2,000, for example. I would then move down. So I'd go 1,200 to 1,500. I would then move down further and go 0 to 1,200. So now I'm roasting a Colombian, but I'm roasting it on the low. I'm roasting it on a profile that's designed for Brazil, for example. Okay. And I'm roasting it at that high level. Then after that, I would go, I still want more. I would take it to that super dark profile. That would be my workflow. Now, if you're still not getting, again, it's a starting point. If you're still not getting something that you feel, if you're not getting coffee that is dark enough, I want to go through second crack, deep into second crack. I want oils to pull themselves out. I want to put it into my hopper and it's got to stick onto the side of my hopper. Okay, because that's how I like to drink coffee. It's simple, but I also like to drink only single shot espressos. And I like to have an 8-ounce cup. I like to have a 250, milliliter cappuccino. But or a latte, but I like to have a single shot inside it. We understand this concept. We understand that that's how people enjoy their coffee. Okay. I would then the further step, I would then start to bring my volume down. So I would then go from roasting 120 to roasting 100 grams of coffee. I would then go, with coffees like that, you could probably only go as low as 80 grams. 70 grams would probably be your limit that you could go below that. But we all know 70 grams of coffee, when we take it out, it's not 70 grams of roasted coffee. We're roasting it super dark, so our percentage of loss in that coffee is going to be far greater. So we probably have to do 2 to 3 batches to get a couple of shots out of our espresso if we're espressing it, but that would be my workflow. That would be how I would push it. I've pushed coffee to the point where I've started a roast fire in chamber because I've pushed coffee. So, and that's not because I've gone over 240 degrees. Kaffelogic can only go to 240 degrees, but that's because I've challenged the concept on how high we can actually, how dark we can roast coffee, you know? So I've roasted it to a point where there's bellows of smoke coming out of it, and I've poured the coffee out and there's oil in the chamber. And I don't know if any of you have done that at home, but I've done it, and it's tough. That's tough to clean. That's tough to clean out of your roaster. So Kaffelogic is capable of doing that. If you want to do that, it's very simple and very easy to do that. But then please don't switch it on and then go to the kitchen and make yourself a cup of tea while it's roasting. Stay at the roaster, if that makes sense, because you could end up with a bit of problems. Yeah, sure. It is capable, but we've also been mindful of drawing back our profiles so that they don't give the user that. Okay,
that's fine.
Does that answer the question around super dark?
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. There is one, probably it's about the last question, if there is not more popping up, but Damir was also asking about the first crack. So how about to lock the first crack? So can you, for example, put an automatic range that if you say it begins at 205 degrees, then I have a margin of about 15 Celsius and it ends up at 220. Is this possible, or is it better to consider only time, or you can also determine that by temperature as well?
Oh, sorry, you mean duration of first crack?
Yeah, I think it was a bit like, about the duration or the range of first crack. So his question is about, because if I understand Damir exactly, because first crack appears for an Arabica about the same temperature. Does it end more or less the same temperature, or is it ending at different temperatures for different coffees?
It can end at different temperatures, just depending on what the profile is doing through that first crack period. So it can end at different temperatures, but it can end at the same temperature. I'll give you an example of that. This profile, for example, here, and I'll put on a zone, and you'll see there's a zone through first crack. Okay, and you see that green, this boost. This is a boost of 4 degrees per minute, and this zone is only 30 seconds. So effectively, we're doing a 2 degree increase, as you can see there through the zone. Now, again, first crack will last time-wise, duration-wise. First crack can last depending on what you do through first crack. Again, if you have a lot of momentum, if you have a profile that is pitched very intensely, and you have a lot of momentum going through first crack, and there's a lot of exothermic mass driven through first crack, your first crack can be quite short and abrupt. So first crack will last 45 seconds. Okay. But first crack could also extend itself out to 1 minute or even 1 minute, 20 seconds, okay? Because our profile is flatter, because we don't have that much momentum leading into first crack, or because we're using a coffee that is cracking at different times. So if you understand what happens at first crack, the coffee cracks, okay? It releases energy, and then it opens itself up. It opens a new layer up for adaptation of energy or adaptation of roast. But what it does, what that force does, is it actually cools the roasting down. So it stops the roast, basically. If it stalls not stalls the roast, that's the wrong word. It slows the roast down, puts the brakes on the roast. Now, if you have coffee that's cracking here, and then cracking there, and then cracking there, and then cracking there, and then cracking there, it'll take, on a real soft, gentle profile, it might take you a minute for that to occur. In that minute, you might have an increase in temperature of 5 to 6 degrees. Okay. But if you have a coffee that on a real high-pitched profile, and that coffee is a specialty coffee and it all cracks at once, okay, it will do the same thing. It'll start to stall the temperature, but it will stall the temperature at once, okay? So your crack there could take 30 seconds or 40 seconds. And you might only have a degree change, or maybe 2-degree change in those 40 seconds, for example, okay? Or you might have it crack super fast and super quick. You would have exactly the same thing. Maybe you might have 4 degrees or 5 degrees change. This is aggressive. You might have 5 degrees change in like 30 seconds post first crack, you know? And that's way too aggressive. We've got to ask ourselves a question there where our coffee's cracking way too fast. Why is it cracking too fast? We've got to look at the lead up. We've got to look at the lead up into first crack. We might see a dump in first crack there. We might see that dump and flick because the roaster will overcompensate. The roaster will go, hey, wait, hold on. I've got to come up to that profile, and it will work harder to come up to that profile. So we have to take it with a few things in consideration. For me personally, as a rule of thumb, I like to get my cracks in a specific time zone. So first thing for me is time zone. I like to get my coffee cracking in somewhere between 6 minutes to about 6 minutes 20. That's where I like to get my coffee cracking, okay? And I run my profile 40 seconds post that, 1 minute post that. And I want a 4 to 5, maybe maximum 6 degree increase in time through that phase. Okay. So I know if I take my coffee after that 1 minute, for example, my coffee should not be cracking anymore. If it is cracking, my profile could be too flat at the end running through first crack. So I have to then ask myself, what is my coffee doing post that? Okay. Have I lost momentum? Does my profile start to do this? My temperature start to do that? Okay. And then I ask myself, have I pushed enough momentum through my profile? That's exactly why we added this boost in here, because we wanted to get a little bit more momentum through first crack. Okay, because the profile we found just started to dip. We just started to have a temperature dip right at the end. And that was giving us a bit of a flatter flavor, a bit more of a, I'm not going to say baked, because I believe it's baked flavor is something that we don't get right, but it was a flatter flavor. We wanted a little bit more brightness through our profile. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So for me, rule of thumb, Ingo, is 1 degree per 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. I want increased through that phase. And I want my first crack lasting about a minute, maximum about a minute, 10 seconds. Then I start to get worried.
I hope this video was helpful for you. If you would like to attend a webinar session like this as well in the future, then go on our website, roastrebels.com, have a look at the webinar session. There you find the dates for the next sessions that we are planning. And if you have any other questions when it comes to roasting machines, green coffees, then always come back to me. I look forward to hearing from you, and you find my contact on roastrebels.com.